ब्रह्मानन्दं परमसुखदं केवलं ज्ञानमूर्तिं द्वन्द्वातीतं गगनसदृशं तत्त्वमस्यादिलक्ष्यम् एकं नित्यं विमलमचलं सर्वदी साक्षिभूतं भावातीतं त्रिगुणरहितं सद्गुरुं तं नमामि। I welcome you all with my love and respects. Today's subject is religion and spirituality. First we will see what we usually understand by the word religion and spirituality, and how we are supposed to understand the word religion and spirituality. Sanatana Dharma is the spiritual portion or the backbone of Hinduism, which is religion. Here when I use the word Hinduism, people of other religion don't feel offended. Sometimes when we need to emphasize the greatness of something, sometimes when we need to explain the greatness of something, we need to compare it with other products or other things, just to express the greatness or uniqueness of this culture and tradition. Sometimes if I compare and make few statements, don't feel offended. And one more thing, what I am expressing is also truth, which is arguable, which is logical. Even then, I don't want to hurt anybody's feeling. So before that itself, I wanted to say these few words. Hinduism is the only religion which allows the people to update itself. All other scriptures end with a very clear statement. All other religious scriptures end with a very clear statement. It can't be updated or commented by any more persons. Even a software can be updated. Even a software can be updated. But their scriptures can't be updated. The moment we close the possibility of updation or new commentaries, we make things dead. We already killed the whole thing, because what is good once upon a time cannot be good, may not be good today. Usually not only it is may not be, it cannot be. Because our body, mind, social structure, everything has changed. Only in Hinduism we have two kind of scriptures. One is called Sruti, experienced. Please understand the word Sruti. The word Shruti cannot be translated as heard. It has to be translated as experienced. It is not just heard, it is experienced. Lot of time, the Sanskrit English translation, when it is not done properly, the whole gist is lost. One more word, this Brahmacharya, is wrongly translated as celibacy, led to so many complications and problems. The word Brahmacharya in Sanskrit means Brahmacharya. Acharya Living, Acharya means living. Brahma, like Brahman. Living like a God is the right translation of that word. Living with God, living like God, or living with existence. Living with existence. Usually, the moment people hear the word Brahmacharya, they come and tell me, they come and ask me, Swamiji, should we renounce everything to achieve jnana, to achieve wisdom? Should we become brahmacharis? Should we give up everything? I tell them, there is no need to give up anything. Just give up what you don't have, that's enough. Live with what you have. Just give up what you don't have. Many times, you live with lot of fantasies which you don't have. When you give up what you don't have, that is enough. You will start living with what you have intensely. You have your husband, wife, family. Live with them intensely. But you have too many fantasies about how your wife should be, how your husband should be. Drop that fantasies. Just drop what you don't have. That's enough. That is what they mean by the word Brahmacharya. Living with existence. Living with what you have. Usually we live with the things which we don't have. Continuously we live with the things which we don't have. Really, if you understand the word Brahmacharya, it never asks you to leave your husband or wife or your house. The very Rishi culture is Grihastha Dharma. All Rishis are called as Brahmacharis, but they are married. They had kids. They have lived with Rishipatnis. But they are called as Brahmacharis. How do you explain? The word Brahmacharya means living with existence, not celibates. Of course, celibates are given a different title. It is called Naishtika Brahmacharya. That's a title. That's different title and different lifestyle. When we translate the Sanskrit words, even if we make a small mistake, the whole concept, the whole main thread is lost. Shruti, the word Shruti should be translated as experienced, not as heard. It is the experience of rishis, forms the basic literature, basic scriptures of our Hindu philosophy, what we call Shruti. The Upanishads are the Shruti literature. That cannot be changed. That is the ultimate experiences of rishis, masters. That doesn't speak about the day-to-day routine or how you can practice. It just states about the goal. We call these scriptures as Shastras. We call these scriptures as Shruti and Shastras. They just give statements, what they experience when they reach the higher consciousness. This is one level scriptures. The second is Smriti. These are the books which gives you the instruction about how to practice these great truths in your day-to-day life. It's like a applied science. Just like applied science, this Smriti is a scripture which you need to follow in your day-to-day life. Without applied science, science has no use. But without the main theories, applied science cannot be created. You can't just have applied science without the main theories. And you can't use the science without applied science. Both are necessary. Both are necessary, especially when we come to the Smriti, when we come to these day-to-day rules and regulations, there should be an option for updating. There should be an option for updating, of course. no other tradition, no other masters dived so deep into the human consciousness. Nobody else has done so much of work on the human consciousness that they could have clear understanding. They could not make such a clear difference between Shruti and Smriti. All other literatures, all other spiritual literatures, they have mixed these two, confused these two, and in the end made a statement, nothing can be changed, nothing can be updated. Some scriptures say nobody can even comment on them. It is so dangerous. Let me tell you a small example. You got a timetable, train timetable, timetable of trains. You go to a railway station, seeing the timetable. After waiting for 24 hours, you suddenly realize not only the train is not coming, it is never going to come. Then you inquire them, what happened? Why the train has not come? And the station master suddenly reminds you, you are having the timetable of last year. It is not this year timetable. It is not the mistake of railway department. It is your mistake. When you have last year's timetable and wait for a train, and if the train doesn't show, if you don't see the train, you just start blaming the whole railway department, or you just start saying there is no such thing as train exists on the planet Earth. That's the same thing we are doing many times with the scriptures. We get old smritis and try to follow them. When we don't see the result, we start blaming. Of course, only the Indian rishis had intelligence to allow their next generation to amend the train timetable. All other systems have banned the very idea of amendments, the very idea of updating. Just by banning the idea of updating, they have destroyed their whole system. Many religions have become just dead corpses. Corpses are, first thing you need to remove immediately and bury them. Next thing, if you don't do that, it is dangerous for your health. Not only they are occupying unnecessary space in your house, they are very dangerous. When you start following the books which are old, which cannot be updated, it is very difficult to live even a regular life, live about spiritual life, even a regular life. Only the Hindu rishis had enough intelligence and courage. One more thing, you need a tremendous courage to trust the disciples, next generations, allowing them to comment on your scriptures, allowing them to comment on your words. It is only Hindu masters, Hindu rishis who had so much of courage, allowing the disciples to comment on your words. If you actually look deep, every book of a master is commented by their disciples. First the Brahma Sutra, written by Vyasa, commented by Shankara. Then Shankara's disciple Sureshwara writes a Vartika. Then Sureshwara's disciple Atmananda writes a Tika. And it goes on and on and on. Of course, our masters had courage and trust over their disciples to allow them to work, update their words. You need to have tremendous courage to allow your disciples to work on your words. You need to trust them. They will understand the thread. They will understand the main message. They will understand the core. One more thing. Only in Hinduism, the idea of commentaries are allowed. In no other system, commenting is allowed. And one more thing, in Hinduism, if you don't comment on these basic three scriptures, Upanishads, Brahma Sutra and Bhagavad Gita, you can't even be called as Acharya. You can't become a teacher unless you have your own unique commentary. This gives us so much of freedom to think, so much of freedom to understand, and so much of freedom to preach what you experience as truth. Hinduism is the only religion which gives so much of freedom. There is a beautiful statement made by Vivekananda. He says in one place, freedom is the basic condition for any growth. Freedom is the basic condition for any growth in any field. If you want growth, you must be given freedom. The countries which gave freedom in the line of science, they have grown like anything in the field of science. The countries which gave freedom in medicines, they have done so much of research and they have grown like anything in that field. The countries which gave political freedom, they did research with all political systems and they have created a best political structure. They have grown in that field. In the West, you have such wonderful social freedom. You have reached the peak, best social structure. Almost every individual is respected. Everybody has got complete freedom to choose. Even though they don't have enough intelligence to choose, they have freedom to choose. Of course, the danger is having freedom without intelligence. That's a very big dangerous situation. Actually, many people come and ask me, especially the disciples who live with me continuously. They come and whenever I make some rule, whenever I say something that it should be followed by all, anybody feels that they don't want to follow or they don't feel like following, when they come and raise any question to me, first thing I do is I give them complete freedom. Because giving them freedom is the best punishment. I have seen within few months they will just come and fall at my feet. Please Swamiji, guide me, I don't want this freedom. Giving them freedom is the best punishment. When they don't have enough intelligence, if you just give them freedom, naturally they will be in dilemma. That's the worst punishment. Of course, West is facing that problem. Even if it is facing the problem of dilemma, freedom is something worth having. It's really something great. They have achieved this state because they have social freedom. Same way, East has achieved spiritual freedom. They have achieved such peaks, such high conscious experiences because they had spiritual freedom. In the East, nobody needs to follow a particular system. You can have your own God. If you are not satisfied with the existing 300 and about how many millions, I don't know, I think 330 millions, 33 crore. 33 crore is the calculation. I have my own understanding. That time the population must have been 33 crore. So each one had their own form of God, their own deity. That's the reason they have said 33 crore. Now if we have to calculate, it must be 6 billion gods. We don't know. So each one had their own unique chosen deity. The concept of chosen deity exists only in Hinduism. If you are not satisfied with all the existing gods, you can create your own. Nothing wrong. You are given a formulas to create your God, that's all. You can just have your own Choose an idea. Ishta Devata, we call it in Sanskrit. Ishta Devata. It is completely your choice. You are just given all the instructions. You are just given all the possibilities. You can cook your own food. You can create your own rules. You can create your own system. You can create your own path. It's like a disciple goes to a master and asks, Master, I have to cross this forest. Please help me. If a master says, go 1100 feet, then there will be a big snake, take a right turn, go 300 feet, there will be a lion, take a left turn and go 3 kilometers, then there will be a tiger, take a right turn, go 10 kilometers, there will be forest fire, take a right turn and go 3 kilometers, you will cross the forest. If a master gives this type of guidance, through which he came, or which is his experience, will the disciple be able to cross the forest? No, never. Today the snake may not be there. Today the tiger may not be there. Today the lion may not be there. Today the bear may be sitting, or some other animal may be sitting. We don't know. Any clear-cut rules, any clear-cut guidance is always misguidance. Please be very clear, all guidance is only misguidance. When you try to guide with the standard rules according to your experience, please be clear, you are misguiding people. Instead of that, any intelligent master will do only one thing. He will just give a torch, burning torch. Carry this torch, go. Use your intelligence and give him the techniques to protect himself from animals. Just give him the way how he can see the route. Only these two are intelligent things. Give him the torch to see the route and give him the intelligence to protect himself from the animals. Then naturally the person will cross the forest safely. All our scriptures are trying to do the second thing. They are trying to give you the torch and the way to protect yourself from the obstacles. The way to go beyond the obstacles. That's all. They never try to give you the details. That's one of the biggest problem we are facing. When we don't have details, when you have so much of freedom, you tend to abuse the freedom. Crimes are nothing but abusing the freedom given to you. That is why in the developed countries, crime rate is high. Crime rate is high because so much of freedom. In underdeveloped countries or the countries which don't have so much of social freedom, the crime rate is very less. But naturally, people are living like slaves. Just how the crime rate is high in the countries where social freedom is more, same way, people also abuse the spiritual freedom. Now we have choices. I am bringing the truth. I am opening the truth completely in front of you. If you look little deeply, you will see many problems in our system and you will be little confused what I wanted to convey through this discourse. I don't want to convey any conclusion. I am just opening, presenting all the possible arguments and all the truths so that you can come to your own conclusion. I do not want to give any conclusion through this lecture. I wanted to create little confusion inside your being. I just want you to think and understand on your own about the whole system, because unless you are little confused, you never grow. As long as you have clear-cut teaspoon feeding concepts, as long as you are given the concepts directly to swallow, you never internalize or you never start working on yourself. People come and ask me, Swamiji, sometimes I feel more confused after reading all these books. I tell them, it means you really read the books and understood. The purpose of the books is done. Actually, in the 18th chapter of the Gita, Arjuna says, "Oh Krishna, now I feel more confused than earlier. Before I started speaking to you, I was less confused. Now I have more confusion, more trouble. What have you done to me?" Krishna says, "Right. You exactly grasped my teaching. Means you heard me completely. I have done what I want to do." Little bit of confusion or little bit of doubts, the questioning attitude is a basic necessity. That is why I am trying to present both sides. The positive sides of Smriti and how it can have negative side effects on our mind if we approach it without maturity. Let me give the whole gist. First thing, we have a set of literatures called Shruti, which cannot be altered or changed, which is the ultimate experience of our masters. Next, we have a set of literatures called Smriti, which can be updated, changed, which can be updated according to times. You can change few statements or you can change few systems. You have the freedom. Now, the next thing, when it comes to the freedom, sometimes we tend to abuse that freedom without knowing, without having enough intelligence to catch the thread. Third thing which you need to understand about this religion and spirituality is, spirituality is the first level scriptures, Shruti, Upanishads. Religion is Smriti, the day-to-day literatures. It's like there is a concept. When you write some books, some literatures to explain the concepts in a day-to-day life, it becomes Smriti. It's like a visualization of the higher concepts. In main scriptures, we speak about Atman, we speak about Brahman, we speak about the all-pervading, all-knowing God or divine or energy. In the Puranas, in the Smritis, in the second level literatures, we speak how to implement those great truths in our day-to-day life. The model personalities or role models are explained. The hero worship starts in Puranas, in Smritis. In Smritis, our masters, they create ideal personalities like Krishna, Rama, Parasurama, Balarama. Different ideal personalities are created. It's like the metaphysical experiences, when they are translated to the physical plane, they become mythological stories. Let me give you this one example, then you will be able to understand. of course, the concepts which I am speaking is too high, root of our system. When a master experiences the God consciousness, the higher experience of awareness, he feels boundaryless, all-pervading, ecstatic, blissful. When he feels that experience, he naturally tries to express it to his disciples. Disciples ask him, how do you feel that experience? He just says, oh, it is just like 1,000 petal roses flowering or blossoming inside my being. Then immediately disciple starts understanding. He visualizes, oh, there is a 1,000 petal lotus in master's head that just blossoms, opens up. That is why he is having this experience. He paints it as a 1,000 petal lotus. That is the way the concept of Sahasrara happened. It is said that there is a 1,000 petal lotus on the head, Sahasrara chakra. When your energy reaches there, when your Kundalini Shakti reaches there, the 1,000 petal lotus blossoms and it starts spreading the Ananda Gandha or Ananda, the bliss, smell of bliss, the joy and ecstasy. Actually, if you open and see, you will not find lotus, you will find only clay. If you open and see, you will not find lotus. It is not physical, it is metaphysical. It is metaphysical experience expressed in a different terms, the different words. When a disciple hears, he visualizes it in a different way. He draws a painting or he visualizes, he pictures as if a master is sitting in meditation, 1,000 petal lotus is there, it is blossoming. When a metaphysical experience is conceived and understood in a physical way, it becomes mythological story. It becomes Purana. It becomes Smriti. It is not completely fact, but it is truth. Understand? The master experiencing the 1,000 petal lotus flowering in his being is not fact, but truth. There is a very big difference between the fact and truth. Fact is what you see with the two eyes. Truth is what you experience, what you can perceive only through the third eye. Truth is the third dimension of fact. Truth is something more than fact. Usually, the truths should be understood from third eye, through your inner experience. If you try to analyze the truth with your limited vision, with your logic of facts, you will miss the whole juice of it. That is why, again and again, these so-called logical people question our Puranas, our scriptures. Again and again they misunderstand the words of our rishis. A big group of atheists or so-called logical thinkers are formed in our system because they don't understand the difference between fact and truth. If you can understand the difference between fact and truth, you will understand why our religion is created, why our great masters, rishis, have created the Puranas. Some Puranas say things which you can't logically relate. If you are a really logical person, you can never relate to the Puranas. But an ultimate experienced person, a person who has become enlightened, why should he say such an illogical thing? Why should he make a statement which doesn't suit our logic? He makes the statement from the level of truth. We try to understand it from the level of facts. That's why I always tell people, science and logic is yet to catch with mystics. Science and logic is yet to catch with mystics. Just because they are not able to catch, never blame mystics. Never blame the experience of the masters. It's like when masters make a statement that there are stars in the sky 24 hours of the day. It is not that it's a lie. No, it is truth. There are stars. We may not be able to see it in the daytime because of the sunlight. Just because we are not able to see, we can't say there are no stars. Just because we are not able to see with our limited vision, we can't blame the truths declared by our masters. Logical person is yet to catch with our masters. If you are too factual, if you are too much based, dependent on your five senses experience, the experience of your five senses, you can't understand there are stars in the sky in the daytime also. Only if you use right instruments, right telescope, you will be able to see the stars in the sky. Actually, if you go to a deep well and see from the well, you can see the stars even in the daytime. If you can go into a deep well and see from the well, the sky, you will be able to see the stars in the daytime. Of course, with right instruments, through right method, you will be able to experience what our masters say. When we don't know the right methods, we start blaming the whole system of truth. There is a very big difference between the truth and facts. Facts are realized with 120-degree vision. Truths are experienced with 360-degree vision. For truths, you need third eye. You need higher sense. You need higher awareness. You need higher perception. For example, if you read the Puranas, they describe extraordinary things like Hanuman lifting a whole hill and flying, or Krishna killing a big snake as a small child. There are incidents which is written. If you read and analyze with your logical mind, you will always find it is illogical. You can't believe a small child killing a very big snake, dancing on its thousands of hoods, and a small monkey carrying a big hill and flying. All these things look very illogical. But if you look deep, they are not just facts. These statements are made to give you the effect of what the incident is, or how much of power they had, or what was the impact of that incident. In reality, we need to understand one more thing. Usually, historians, people of logic, they see all the incidents, events only with their eyes. They record what has happened in the plane of length, breadth and depth. What happened according to their vision. What happened according to their understanding. They record it. They can understand only in the level of length, breadth and depth, that's all. They can say only in the level of length, breadth and depth, which you can see through your eyes. But when the masters see, they see another one dimension also. Not only the length, breadth and depth, they see one more dimension of space and time. You need to understand this space and time with a small example. Let me tell you this example. One old man went to a nearby village for some business. When he came back, when he was coming back from the village, far away he saw his house is on fire. Started shouting, screaming, rolling on the ground, crying, weeping. Oh, my house is on fire, please save me, please help me to put out this fire. He started shouting, screaming, weeping. One of his sons ran towards him and told, don't worry father, just 2 days ago we sold that house, it is not our house anymore. Immediately this guy stood up. Oh, is it so? Then okay. He started smiling. He became alright. Within 10 minutes, one more son came and he said, no father, we have sold the house, that is true, but we have not yet got the money. Then again he started rolling on the ground and started crying, weeping. Oh, please save me, save my house. I don't know what is happening. And again his wife came and gave the report. No, don't worry. Today morning only we got the money. It is already in the bank. We have deposited the money in the bank. We have got our money. Then again this guy stood up and said, oh, then it's okay. He became alright. Look this incident carefully. Just in 10 minutes time, same incident, same person, but two different reactions. He went through different moods. Within 10 minutes, he had suffering, he consoled himself. Again he had suffering, again he consoled himself. He undergoes different emotion, different moods. The incident is same. If a historian records this incident, he will record only what happened in length, breadth and depth. He will record only one thing. He will be able to record only one thing. What happened in the outer world? Length, breadth and depth. The house is on fire. This is the date. This is the time. This is the way it got fire. This is the way it ended. He can record only what has happened in the length, breadth and depth. If a rishi sees a person with a higher consciousness, if he sees, only he can record not only what happened in the length, breadth and depth, he will be able to record what happened in the space or consciousness of the owner. What happens in the space and time also because of this incident? What is the impact of that incident on the consciousness? We need to understand one thing, very important thing. You can't just read the incidents which happened in the length, breadth and depth and decide the history. History cannot be reduced just to the level of facts. We need to understand much more deeply the impact of that incident on human consciousness or on humanity. Only then we can really experience or realize the truth. All historians try their best to record only the incidents according to their length, breadth and depth. not according to their impact on human consciousness. For example, Gandhiji fasting and a housewife fasting after the fight in the house. These two cannot be the same. Gandhiji fasting for the freedom and housewife fasting for her freedom cannot be the same. If a historian records an incident, naturally he will record Gandhiji fasted for 2 days for freedom of the country. The housewife fasted for 2 days for her needs. This is the way it will be recorded. If you make the factual recordings, naturally you will record both incidents in the same way. Any intelligent person cannot agree both are one and the same. The impact of the incident, impact of the fact on space and time is totally different. When you record an history or an incident, you need to consider not only length, breadth and depth, you need to consider the space and time also. You need to consider the impact of that incident on the space and time. Our Puranas are written by the masters who can realize the impact of any incident in space and time also. That is the reason in some places some statements are made which you think as illogical or exaggeration. It is not really exaggerated. The statement is created for you to understand or realize the importance of that incident on human consciousness. Hanuman lifting Sanjeevani hills and flying. The incident may not be fact as it is. He may not have lifted a huge hill. He might have lifted only one part or few stones. But the incident has got a major impact on the history. Timely help, timely, on time, he bringing that particular medicine to the war field as made help Lakshmana to get his life back. That incident has done a lot, contributed a lot to the history. To impress or to express the importance of the incident, they have dramatized the whole scene, or they would have used little more words to explain, to make you understand the impact of that incident on space and time, or the importance of that incident in the human history. So what you need to understand is the spirit, is the thread. Now I come to the main subject. With this idea, with this understanding, if you look our religious rituals, religious practices, you will be able to understand how they are embodiment or the expression of spirituality. How they are straight, directly connected to spirituality. The religious rituals or the religious scriptures or religious way of life, religious doctrines, religious rules, religious regulations. The very religious life itself is created only from this angle. They are the practical day-to-day life or manual to live, experience the great truths expressed by enlightened rishis. You need to have this one understanding how historians usually record only the length, breadth and depth, not the space and time, and how our rishis have recorded length, breadth and time, length, breadth, depth and space and time. The method in which our rishis have recorded incident is holistic. They have not missed anything. Usual historians, they tend to miss a lot, and they have missed a lot. That's the reason all Western history is based only on year, only on what happened, never on what is the impact of that incident on human consciousness. In the East, we created Puranas. In the West, they created history. History is superficial, just record of the incidents without bothering about their impact on human consciousness. In the East, masters have bothered, they gave more importance to the impact of that particular incident on human consciousness, on humanity. That's why we say, if you want to know the whole Eastern history, just read the history of this 10 handful of enlightened masters. That's enough. You will know the gist. Just read the history of few incarnations. You know the complete history of East. In the West, you can't say that, because they never bothered about the impact of a particular person's life on human consciousness. We wrote the history based on the impact, not on the incident. There may be very big incident happened which has no impact on the human consciousness. Our people never bothered to record it. They never even recorded it. Our people never bothered to record that type of incidents. There may be very small incident which would have changed the whole trend of thinking of the East. They recorded those incidents with a lot of importance given to it, and the so-called exaggeration is also done. Of course, when I say the so-called exaggeration, you need to understand, you can't analyze and criticize these incidents based on your logic and understanding. You need to have the complete vision why they made those statements. Only then you will be able to understand. Now we need to approach whole religion, all our customs, all our rules and regulations with the concept why it is created, what they wanted to convey through these rules, through these rituals, through these practices, what they wanted to express, what they wanted to give to us, what our masters wanted to tell us through this instruction. If you have that much of courtesy, that much of patience to look into the things with this understanding, what they want to convey, you will be able to always analyze, understand, appreciate and follow the truth or the real thing which is expressed through our religious practices, through our religion. You will be able to receive the wisdom, you will be able to experience the truths which is expressed by our masters, by our rishis. All you need is a little bit of sympathy or compassion towards the teachings of our rishis. We need to have little openness to look into the detail. This one understanding of length, breadth and depth, and length, breadth and depth and time and space. This is the only understanding which we need to have to understand religion and spirituality. Usually, because we don't have the understanding, because we are not able to analyze between fact and truth, we confuse religion and spirituality. We mistake religion as spirituality or spirituality as religion. Finally, tend to condemn everything, or tend to disbelieve everything, or tend to drop everything. If you look with this understanding, you will be able to segregate, analyze, understand, experience the real truth, which is spirituality and which is religion, and you will be able to create your own technique, your own method, your own religion to reach the spiritual experience. With this one knowledge, your whole life, the spiritual life, can be transformed from contradictions to the real spiritual experience. Without this understanding of fact and truth, religion and spirituality contradict each other. With this one understanding of fact and truth, the religion and spirituality starts complementing each other. Actually, religion and spirituality complement each other if you have this one understanding. If you don't, they contradict each other. It is up to you whether to be in this contradicting plane or in the complementing plane. Understand, even though it is little difficult, or you think it is little difficult, take time, take little energy, contemplate on these great truths. Your whole life will be transformed. All the questions will disappear. This one understanding, this one truth will solve all the questions. Almost all the questions which you have about religion and spirituality.